Which makes sense because, I mean, a lot of times you think like so many players think, well, if I grab a, whether it's slide or just playing, but we'll talk in terms of slide, you're going to learn some licks and then you're playing slide, and there's so much more than just learning how to play a lick or a riff, like you just said, that setup thing I would think would be just immensely important to make it comfortable, to make the sounds correct, but I suppose comfortable just for you in general too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when and it's one of those things too that you don't necessarily have to learn how to do the stuff yourself. It is helpful if you want to do that.
Right.
But anybody at a guitar store, if you give them instructions and you go up to a guy that does work on a guitar, you can say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to play with a brass slide, which maybe is a little heavier. I want to have maybe 10s or even 11s. Like I have 11s on my guitar,
right,
because I like having a little bit more meat on the strings,
right,
so that because I usually play with my fingers, and if I'm going up here, I'm pulling on those strings pretty hard to get a fat tone, and if they're really light, you're going to yank them and they'll go out of tune, and you're going to get a thin sound.
Sure.
So there are certain guys' styles, if you're trying to emulate them, they're going to set up their guitar a certain way, and you're going to get a certain sound.
Right.
Derek Trucks plays Gibsons, 11s, usually a pretty high action through a Fender amp that's really, really loud.
Right.
That's how he gets his sound. Whereas somebody like Ry Cooter was going to play a Fender with a lighter gauge and has a very different attack and a different feel, and he sets up his guitar completely different. So it's really helpful if you kind of get an idea of what you're going for. You can set yourself up for success by starting it out, and then it starts to sound closer and helps build your confidence.
Sure.
So when you're sounding a little closer to what your heroes or the guys that got you turned on to slide guitar, that's going to help you just stay more interested, because you're like, oh wow, that actually sounds kind of like that lick. That's kind of my thing. That's that hook. It's those little small victories are what keep you coming back every day, exactly, even if you're frustrated.
So what is what's one of your favorite licks?
Oh man, one of my favorites. It's super simple. So it's just this repeating lick. You'll hear it. Dwayne Allman does it on a tune called "One Way Out," and you just hear it. And every time I've heard it, I just go, "Oh, that is just." It makes you scrunch up your face. You go, "Oh, that's so nasty." And he's just going from C to A, so the minor third to the one.
Sure.
So all he's doing, he's taking one note on the C. Just C, A, C. And he's just sliding back and forth between his thumb and his finger. And he does it so fast and it's so aggressive. I'm just like, oh, yeah, like that riff just turns me on.
Yeah, right.
And then he just slides up to the D, which is a 4. And it kind of shows you this little box that, especially if you're playing blues or classic rock, there's only a couple of note choices that you can use. And it kind of gives you a foundation, again, to build on. So if you know where you're one, that's like your home base, right? And if you know, okay, if I can go from, home base to first and then home base to second, kind of gives you a base path to go around. And that's kind of how I look at it, because the frets are there as kind of guide markers, right? But you have to position the slide right over the top of it and to kind of get you close to the intonation that you need.
Okay.
But when you're playing slide, you don't want to just play play right straight on it, because you want to use the slide to make the slip and slide.
Sure. Right.
So you can kind of slide in between the two, but it's helpful because with the guitar, things aren't labeled.
Right.
It's like you've got 6 things that are basically 6 pianos.
Yeah,
that
they're
are
all crossed from each other.
Yeah,
so
and they're not tuned the same way. There's different relationships between the two.
Yep.
So you kind of have to. All right, like where are the notes that I can be like, all right, if I put my slide over that, I can at least get close.
Yeah, right.
Most of it with slide, you're just trying to get close, and the closer you get, it'll sound a little cleaner. But sometimes, even if you're a little off, Muddy Waters didn't have particularly good intonation, but it sounded awesome.
Yeah, right.
So you're really kind of taking the training wheels off when you don't have. You can fall and slip and slide, but you kind of have to let yourself do that in order to get a little bit closer, and your aim gets better, and your ears get a little better.
Right.
And you go, oh, okay. You just kind of give yourself a skeleton to work around, and then it gets you close.
So if a player has pentatonic knowledge, does that help?
Yeah, it definitely will help. With my lesson, you don't necessarily need to know what the pentatonic scale is ahead of time, because I do explain it.
Sure.
So I'll just, because I mean, sometimes when you start talking music theory, especially with guitar players, their eyes gloss over, and they're like, oh, hold on a second, I don't know what you're talking. You're doing math with letters, and I don't understand what's going on.
Right.
Whereas, and I was the same way, but once you get a little bit, a little bit more, it just helps kind of help you view the neck differently, helps you start thinking conceptually a little differently.
Right.
And if you start, a pentatonic scale, in my opinion, that's your basic foundation. That's where you start.
Mm-hmm.
You give yourself, okay, where's each of these notes? What's its role? Like, what is it there to do? Is it 1, 3, 4, 5, 7? That's how I think of things as scale positions like that. Not knowing the notes for me is also helpful, but it's the what's the scale position. That's how me personally, that's how my brain is, and that's how I teach too.
Sure.
So just having that a little bit of pentatonic knowledge will kind of help say, all right, these are these little cell patterns that you can use and you can slip and slide around. Then once you get those down, then you start connecting them together.
Okay.
So it gives you little runs and little patterns that you can use, because we're still doing standard tuning, but you can, if you already know your pentatonic patterns, you can play a slide with those. It's still the same stuff.
Right.
So you just have to find different ways to approach it, and then it kind of helps move you up and down the neck as opposed to across the neck.
Right.
Sometimes if you're learning like a simple pentatonic pattern like that, on this one you can go.
Right.
So you can go up
So
the
more
neck.
of a linear approach.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that's something that's helpful, especially with slide runs, because you're not necessarily stuck in the same little boxes. It helps open things up.
Right.
And when you don't have the frets on there too, you can get little notes and bends and slurs and things like that too. But
Very cool.